Good evening. Can everybody hear me in the back? Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Physical Education Part 4. My name is Chase Milner. I'm the CEO of Woodford Forward. For those who may not be aware of Woodford Forward, we are a grassroots nonprofit that aims to work with government officials in the community to provide land use advocacy for innovative development and redevelopment of our urban areas, adequate infrastructure for citizens and businesses, and the agriculture use of productive farmland throughout Woodford County. Through these efforts, we strive to promote the link of quality of life with economic development. So tonight we're very fortunate to be joined tonight we're very fortunate to have Versailles City Councilwoman Laura Dake be here to offer introductory remarks for tonight's event. She is the executive director of ITN Bluegrass, a nonprofit that provides 24/7 automobile transportation to 60-year-olds and above adults with visual impairments in Fayette County, Kentucky. Since 2008, ITN Bluegrass has delivered 70,000 rides, has a part-time staff of 14 people, and more than 375 member riders. Laura currently serves on the Versailles City Council as a newly elected councilwoman. She chairs the Downtown Planning Advisory Committee, set up by the mayor earlier this year to work on downtown revitalization efforts here in Versailles. Laura has advanced degrees from the University of Michigan, from George Mason University, and she's married to Bill, a family physician at Health First Bluegrass, and has 3 children, 2 daughters in college and a son here, a senior at Woodford County High School. So would you please make her welcome tonight as I introduce Miss Councilwoman Laura Dake.
Thank you, Chase, for inviting me here to give the opening remarks tonight. 20 to 25 years ago, it must have been before we had kids, because my husband and I took a lot of road trips then. I remember remarking to him, I almost dread traveling anymore. Every town is starting to look the same. You probably know what I mean. The strip of shopping plazas on bypasses that ring dying downtowns, the same fast food chains, parking lots where green farms once stood. All this came to be called sprawl. Anytown, USA. That's what I always loved about coming home to Versailles. There was some of that, but not nearly as much as other cities and small towns. Fast forward some 20 years. I believe we in Woodford County are at a critical juncture and have been for the past several years. How do we preserve the beauty of this land and what makes it so special, while at the same time remain welcoming and modern and relevant? In my opinion, we use the land already in the urban services boundary, and if you know me, you know I mean pre-Edgewood Farm annexation, and especially focus on redeveloping areas that are blighted or shopping centers that have outlived their usefulness. Despite the few who voted for me just because I'm a woman, and I had a few people tell me that they were going to do that, or because I knocked on their door. Some people said I was the only one, they were home and I knocked on their door and they were going to vote for me. I believe that I'm really on city council for the very public positions that I took for infill and redevelopment and against rampant, unplanned growth. I was excited when the mayor appointed me chair of the Downtown Planning Advisory Committee earlier this year, a committee that is working to make improvements in a wide area of downtown. We have 4 subcommittees: Big Spring Park, Business Development, Lexington Road Improvements, and Signage and Street Art. By the way, if you are interested in any of those topics, we would love to have you on the subcommittee, so contact me, and I'll be glad to plug you in wherever you might fit. You may have not seen a lot of things going on right now related to those particular areas, but you will over the winter and into the spring. We have some really cool projects, including some rain gardens on Lexington Road that we are planning and we got a grant for. So we're really excited about some of the things that, to help improve the look and feel of the downtown area of Versailles. And I'm so pleased that people who really get the importance of redevelopment, like Alex and Emily Riddle and the community activism class in the high school, that have really embraced this community and what it means to create a vibrant downtown. In September 2016, I wrote an editorial in the paper related to the Edgewood Farm annexation and rezoning. I thought it was longer ago than that. It was actually when I was campaigning, but it was only a little over a year ago. And here is a short excerpt from that. Quote, "If a neutral observer had followed Versailles' land use issues for the past 2 years by attending the 2014 listening sessions at KCTCS, where the 200+ people present were asked to work on a vision for our town's future, by sitting in on public hearings, and by reading news articles and letters to the editor, he or she couldn't help but conclude that unbridled growth is not what most people want." Unquote. I am so pleased that the important issue of redevelopment and infill is once again being brought to the public's attention, and I applaud Woodford Forward's leadership on this. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you, Laura, for being here. Our first speaker tonight is the Executive Director of GleanKY, and she's also a Woodford County resident. So please welcome Stephanie Wooten to the stage.
I'm a little shorter than the others. Excuse me while I move the microphone. All right, so first of all, thank you so much for having me here. You hear me? I am so grateful to be here, be a part of Woodford County, and share with you a little bit about something so important to me, which is the nonprofit that I run called GleanKY. Oh, good. Oh, well, we'll work through that. So to start off, many of you may not have heard of GleanKY before. We have been working in the central Kentucky area for about the last 7 or 8 years, but are just now coming to Woodford County. So I'm going to go over the basics of what we do, and then get in a little bit more to what we hope to do here, and I'd love to talk to any of you afterwards more in depth about that. GleanKY, our mission is very straightforward. We redistribute excess fresh fruits and vegetables to nourish Kentucky's hungry. We chose those words very carefully, and I hope you'll see why as I go through my presentation. To us, the word redistribution is a very important word. It's about making use of resources that already exist in the community and making them more accessible to people in need. The words fresh fruits and vegetables are also chosen very carefully, and I think you'll see why. Now, some of you might be wondering, do I need to give a cue to somebody for the PowerPoint? Next. So some of you might be wondering, why is this girl here talking about food when we're supposed to be talking about places? But to GleanKY, the two are very intertwined. The truth is that at GleanKY, we always say the food is the glue, food is the glue. We see that as we bring fresh, nutritious food to communities, to agencies that serve people in need, things flourish. The food holds our lives together, and when the food that holds our lives together is healthy and nutritious, the actions that we take and the community that we build is also healthy and vibrant. And food is very connected to economic prosperity, and is obviously a big determinant in the public health of the community. If we all can access fresh, healthy food, then we can all lead healthy lifestyles and be an active member of our community. So some people ask us, why are you doing this work here? And the truth is that 1 in 6 Kentuckians don't know where their next meal is going to come from. 1 in 5 children don't know where their next meal is going to come from. The piece there that I think is most important to know is that food insecurity is not just, I open my pantry and there's nothing. That's a very simple way to view hunger, food insecurity. But really, the truth is that of these 1 in 6 people, or 1 in 5 children, they're opening their pantry and there's not the types of food that are culturally relevant to them, that they know how to prepare, or that allow them to lead a healthy lifestyle. And so when we think about that statistic alongside this other statistic, which is that 40% of the food grown in this country is thrown away, you can see that there's a huge opportunity there to share with people the resources that we have, the abundant agriculture that we have, such that they have access to food and appropriate food, nutritious food to lead a healthy lifestyle. So food insecurity is a word that gets thrown around a lot now. In the last couple years, research around it and use of that term has come a long way. But I think a lot of people still fail to grasp the magnitude of the problem. Food insecurity is not a consistent element in most people's lives. Even the most vulnerable in our community often have intermittent access to healthy food. And what we really need to understand, I think, and take action around is that there are so many gaps in the system that prevent people from having regular access to healthy and nutritious food. Taking a glimpse at Woodford County, there was a study done in 2015 called Map the Gap. So you can pull this data for any county that you'd like. This is Woodford County's data, and I guess we're lucky in some senses in that we are a little bit lower than the state average of 1 in 6 people food insecure, but we still have almost 3,000 citizens who are struggling to make ends meet and feed their children and their families. The other, I think, important number on this page is that almost 40% of the people who are food insecure don't have traditional assistance methods available to them. And I think I pasted the income numbers there for those who are curious of what that means. But the 185% poverty level, you don't qualify for assistance, but it's very difficult to provide nutritious food on a consistent basis to your family. So this is what GleanKY works very hard to address. In the communities where we work, we have a really simple model. We go to a source of food. That could be a grocery store, it could be a garden, a farm, an orchard, a farmer's market, a backyard garden, and we pick up excess produce that would otherwise be thrown away. Of that 40% statistic that I talked about earlier, the biggest portion of that is fresh fruits and vegetables. Makes sense, it's very perishable. Also, consumer expectations are really, really high, and so retail establishments in particular throw away a lot of produce because of how it looks or how far it is on the ripening schedule. And so what we do is we pick up that produce and we immediately deliver it to what we call recipients. I think what we do is a little bit unique because recipients in our world aren't individual people. We don't feed people directly. Instead, we bring that fresh produce to a network of agencies that feed people directly. So we work with over 80 agencies across central Kentucky, and they take all different kinds of shapes and forms. They could be a large regional pantry. God's Pantry Food Bank is a really great partner of ours, for example. They could take the shape of a church feeding program or a sandwich ministry. They could be agencies that provide another service primarily, but food is a component of that. And so what we do is supplement the resources, the food resources that they have in an effort to increase the nutritional value of the meals that they ultimately serve their clients. So it's a pretty straightforward process, and we've been overwhelmed with the results. We were founded in 2010, and the founders had a goal of gleaning 1,000 pounds of produce. At the time, that sounded huge. And that first year, they gleaned 37,000 pounds, and they thought, I think we're onto something here. As of the last data I saw when I left the office today, we've gleaned 1.3 million pounds of fresh produce. So I think we are onto something. There is just such a tremendous amount of produce out there that all these wonderful sources would happily donate if there's people there to receive it. So that's what we do. So I always show that graphic because this graphic is just terrifying. But this is what GleanKY really looks like. It's a bunch of dots and a bunch of lines. We make 40 trips a week in Fayette County. This is a Lexington map of some of our downtown locations. And we immediately deliver it to at least one agency. So we aren't a warehouse. We aren't storing and sorting and repurposing food. We're simply picking up and delivering. We like to talk about what we do in terms of values. I think the model is very straightforward, but when we're talking about replicating it across a region, what we didn't want to do was box ourselves in too much. We didn't want to come to a community and say, you're going to glean the farmer's market on Saturday and take it to a food pantry. We wanted as much flexibility in the model as possible, and so we often use values to talk about how to implement a GleanKY program in your community. And these are the three big ones for us. The one that I like to talk about and highlight the most is integrity. I think the other two make a lot of sense. We focus on inclusiveness. We don't have requirements on who receives our food. We leave that to the agency, and we ask that the agency passes along the food for free to the recipient. Which are the other two values up there. But the one in the middle, integrity, is one that I like to talk about a lot because it comes up a lot. People often say, are you giving people food out of the dumpster? But also because when we were talking about food insecurity earlier, I think there's a misunderstanding about what hungry people need. And so it's very important to GleanKY to, one, dispel the myth, no, we're not giving people food out of the dumpster, but also make sure that our number one priority is providing high quality, nutritious food to people in need. So that's what that value in the middle means. And that's really the sort of hallmark of a GleanKY program. As we're starting work here in Woodford County, we've been doing listening sessions and been out and about in the community trying to figure out where we fit. That's the piece that we want to make sure GleanKY here has. Everything else is really up to you all. So there's three main ways to get involved with GleanKY. One is scheduled gleanings. I mentioned we do 40 gleanings a week in Fayette County. That is mostly this type of gleaning. You know, Costco calls us, and we develop a partnership with them, and 7 days a week we pick up produce from their produce department before they throw it away. So we need lots of volunteers to make those trips happen. They're all on a calendar. You sort of know what you're getting into before you sign up. All of the pickups have a predetermined recipient, and it sort of moves like clockwork. The second type of opportunity is what we call rapid response gleaning. Essentially, farmers, sometimes gardeners, sometimes other sources, give us a call when they're looking out at their fields or on their shelves and saying, we've got more than we know what to do with, we don't have a market for this product, can you come in the next 24 hours and pick this up? So we use a text message-based system where you could opt in and get that message and says, hey, there's a farm out in Woodford County, we'll be there tomorrow at 10, meet us there if you can. That's where a lot of our field gleaning happens and harvesting happens, but it's sort of an exciting way to get involved, and you really don't know what's going to happen. And the last way is what we call Plant It Forward. That is a program designed for gardeners, and it's really a way to sort of become a source yourself. If you grow a garden, you know there's that point in the squash season in particular in which your neighbors like run away from you when they see you. We want to know about that. We would happily take your produce. We do everything from go to somebody's garden and harvest it for them to just direct them to a food bank down the road that maybe they didn't know about or didn't know what the hours were or how to access it, and sort of make that the fruits of their labor a little bit more available to those in their community. So I mentioned earlier we're sort of on the cusp of being here in Woodford County. This is a map of our sort of intended expansion out across central Kentucky. The green counties, I think they are, yep. The green counties are where we had an established presence at the end of last year. We've been working very hard to make ourselves known in the yellow counties as a way of just slowly moving outwards into the county. Or into the state, I'm sorry. And we do strive eventually to be a statewide organization. We didn't name ourselves GleanKY by accident. But again, I mentioned this intentionality of that process for us. We get calls from across the state a lot, and everyone should glean. We don't have a trademark on gleaning. We encourage you to glean. But GleanKY's presence is going to be very intentional in each community, and we're not going to move on until we're ready. So we're here now. We're excited to be here now. We've been working for the last several months to get going. We had some great gleanings happen here this fall. Farmers market's been involved, and several wonderful farmers. Got to know a lot of really awesome agencies here. So I'm very excited for what the future holds. That is my contact information. Again, please talk to me afterwards if you have any interest in seeing this happen here. But you're always welcome to give me a call or send me an email, and I'd love to talk more about what we can do here. So thank you very much for allowing me to do a little food talk in the middle of our physical education here. Thank you.
Thank you a lot, Stephanie, for being here. And I hope that if that made you hungry, there is food in the back provided by Holly Hill Inn. And I hope you've noticed some synergy here this evening with GleanKY and our friends at Spark Community Café. As Wendell Berry once said, eating is an agricultural act. And what we can do as community members to help promote local foods, access, and consumption and consumerism, I think will be very important to the future of saving our important farmlands here in Woodford County. So we're going to take a little segue to our next topic, which is we're going to begin to talk about trails and some really exciting infill and redevelopment work that's happening here in Fayette County. Our next speakers are Brandi Peacher, the Director of Project Management in the Office of the Mayor of Lexington, Kentucky, Fayette County Urban County Government, and Allison Lankford, Executive Director of the Town Branch Fund. I will let them take the mic for their presentation about the Town Branch Commons, the greenways. And speakers, you're more than welcome to take the mic down if you. Thank you, Brandi.
I'm going to do this because I move around a lot. And as he said, I need to see what I'm talking about. So, hi, everybody. My name is Brandi Peacher. As he said, I'm with the mayor's office in Lexington, and I'm happy to be here with you guys. I'm here to talk about what is the Town Branch Commons. So let's go on to the next slide, and we'll stay there for a minute. Here's the problem with me holding it. I'm going to cause technical difficulties. In case you're not familiar with the Town Branch Commons overall project, it's something we're very excited about in our community, and our mayor is very excited about. It's a project that we've been discussing since about 2013, but actually it goes much farther than that. Many of you guys have probably heard the stories of Town Branch and how Lexington was established upon its banks. But at some point in time, it became an unhealthy feature of our community, and so that was placed underground, and it runs beneath our feet along Vine Street in downtown Lexington. And so all of the water that still runs there today is within a culvert system that runs under the street. But we have some wonderful people in our community, some of which I've talked about already this evening with some folks, but Town Branch Trail, Inc., Van Meter Pettit and his crew. There's been others in the community who have said for many years, why are we not really utilizing this and connecting back to our history and also utilizing something that is so important to our community's health and our well-being moving forward. So in 2013, as part of the Rupp Arena district plan, the design team at that point in time developed a master plan which incorporated a look not just at the building of Rupp Arena, but at what the district and the downtown should offer. And out of that came the bigger idea of Town Branch Commons. Then, moving forward, the Lexington Downtown Development Authority, along with the Mayor's Office, University of Kentucky, and I believe Fayette Alliance and Bluegrass Community Foundation may have been a part of that as well, hosted an international design competition. That international design competition resulted in us hiring a group out of New York called Scape Landscape. And if you haven't heard of these folks, man, at that point in time, we're like, who are they? But they're really awesome. They have been up and coming in the past 4 to 5 years, and their lead designer, Kate Orff, is now known internationally with her work. So what I'm excited to talk about is where we've come since then. It was a dream, it was a vision, it's now becoming a reality, and we're so proud of that moment for Lexington. And so the Town Branch Commons is not just one place. It's all about connecting people, and it's about relating back to that strip of history that we had once upon a time. It's about addressing our stormwater and green infrastructure needs in our downtown core. And it's just so much more than just a trail, but a trail is a big piece of that item. And for us, we feel that it's a huge step forward in so many pieces and components of our community. One, to connect neighborhood to neighborhood and business to business and so on and so forth. But as many of you sit here in this room, and I just made the drive out to Versailles, I hope that someday we see that connection all the way out here so that we can walk, bike, and run that path as well. So by having this connection, we'll be able to do that someday in the future. And Allison Lankford, who is here with me, she'll be speaking about another piece of the project. So I'm trying to give you just a general overall history, so then she can tell you more details about the park that she's overseeing. We'll go ahead to the next slide. The Town Branch project itself, as I said, is more than a trail. It's about a central park, which that's what Allison's going to talk about. We're very excited about that. It's about making those connections I just talked about, and it's about improving our public spaces. We have so many opportunities within our urban environment, and so we are thrilled to look at what those opportunities are that are adjacent to this Town Branch trail in this system. Next slide. The Town Branch, as I said, is made up of several components. One is the Greenway, and the Greenway is the trail. So the language shift there is just a branding opportunity for us. And so that is a publicly funded component. That is the project that I'm overseeing out of the mayor's office. And so we have a big team to help facilitate that implementation. Additionally, we have the Town Branch Park. So we have the spine of the Greenway, we have the park system. There's several existing parks along that path, but what we're most excited about is that central park aspect that we will be creating at the rear of Rupp Arena, at the core, essentially, of this system. That's what Allison will speak about, and that is privately funded, and she'll tell you more about that entity. Also, there's many adjacent opportunities I've already alluded to, and I'll show you some of those in this slide deck, and the public improvements that come along with that. So the Greenway. It's interesting, as I was talking to Rob before this, and we were looking at how do we expand out, how do we connect out to our neighboring counties. What really made us very excited about the Town Branch Commons is the piece that it's that center linking element that was missing to what we were already creating. So you can see the Town Branch Trail, which is the trail system that runs, if we shift, it's a little bit northwest, and that runs out toward Leestown Road, McConnell Springs, Masterson Station Park. We also had Legacy Trail. We have most of that built already. Horse Park coming into downtown. But once they came into downtown, what was missing? There was no way to get from point A to point B and run that entire system. So the blue portion is Town Branch Commons. So we see this as the last mile, the last linear mile to be built of the larger system, so that when it's complete within Fayette County alone, we will have a 22-mile continuous trail system. Next slide. The Greenway itself, we like to think of it more as not just a trail, but it is a linear park in and of itself. So you will see that it will be more of a park environment along this trail system. It will have an interpretation of water, because as I already said, Lexington was based upon this path of the Town Branch Creek. And so while it runs beneath our feet, how can we remember the fact that that was there? And we can't rip all that up and bring the water up to the surface in all locations. We have some opportunities in some key spots, but along the greenway where it's within the downtown core, space is limited. So we're using interpretive ways to illustrate the water beneath your feet. It'll be seen in various ways, through plazas, through art, through water features, and a variety of those things that you'll see as it comes alive. And then, as we said, not only is it continuous trail, it's for bikes and pedestrians. So we're very excited about that. Next slide. I always get the question, all right, you're making this happen. How are you making it happen? So the funding is a key part. There's no way we could have ever been able to get this off the dime without some of the support that we have had locally at the state level and federal level. I believe in 2016, so it hasn't been that long, we were awarded a federal Tiger grant. And so this will be the first Tiger grant that Lexington has received. It's a learning opportunity for us as far as grants are concerned, but we are thrilled to have this opportunity because with that we were receiving $14.5 million to put toward this system. Additionally, there were more federal grants involved with that, state funding, and local dollars that went into that. But you can see the federal piece being almost 52% of the funding really pushed it over the edge, and with the state and the local capacity, we're able to make this happen. Next slide. So this gets specifically to the greenway. The green line, if we start from the right side of the screen, that starts at Midland Avenue at 3rd Street. That's Isaac Murphy Memorial Art Garden. The green line indicates where the greenway will continue on. So at Isaac Murphy, you will connect up at the Legacy Trail and be able to go to the horse park. Once you make your way down along that green line, it traverses from east to west through downtown Lexington. Once you hit Rupp Arena, it wraps around the back of that and will be open up to the Grand Park, the Town Branch Park, which Allison will tell you more about. And at that point, it is a connection and a trailhead so that you can connect to the Town Branch Trail leading out toward Masterson Station, and also connect, we're building a spur up Newtown Pike so you can connect to Legacy Trail again through that location. So this is 3.2 miles that we will complete through this phase. Next slide. So a little detail. The architect in me wants to share a little bit of these designs. I get excited about it. This is an example of what a multi-use path will look like. In some places in downtown, we'll have bikes and pedestrians and the waterways and the landscape all sharing a space. This is an example of that, where you have a buffer from the vehicles with landscape. You have bringing in elements of our rural environment down into the urban core of Lexington and re-illustrating or reinterpreting how that's seen. So we feel a little bit of the horse farm right in the middle of downtown. Next slide. If you've been to Lexington lately and driven down Midland Avenue, this is what it looks like. We've got, of course, not all of Midland Avenue looks like this. We just happen to have this shot. But construction's going to be going there someday. But lots of traffic, lots of steady traffic. Next slide. We hope that your experience now will be more like this, so that not only will the cars still move, we will not eliminate any traffic lanes for this project. It will still be the same number of traffic lanes. They will be smaller so that the speeds will slow down a tad bit, which if you're a pedestrian down there, that was not a bad thing. I wouldn't mind for them slowing down a bit. But from this generous public right-of-way, which we already own, we are able to incorporate these water features, one, to illustrate the water within our community, but also collect and clean water. As it rains, they will be collected into this system, cleansed, and put back into our system in a much cleaner fashion. And then, as you can see, there's bike and pedestrian, and I can't wait to walk and bike and run on this because it looks so much better than the slide before, right? Next slide. So in the case we just saw, pedestrians and cyclists share a path. That's a multi-use path. In the urban downtown area, it's much tighter, so we have to be more efficient with that space, but we want to be able to separate bikers from pedestrians whenever possible so that it's a safer experience for everyone. So you can see here we have a pedestrian a pedestrian aisle, pedestrian path at the top. We have a green buffer in the center, which again will collect rainwater and cleanse that, and the bike path on the bottom, which is adjacent to the street. Next slide. Example of this is Vine Street again. If you're familiar, this used to be the visitor center, but we're right at Rose Street and Vine. Next slide. And this is what we anticipate this to look like. Again, you can see we're bringing in some of the limestone walls that we see out near the horse farms. We see some of that greenery coming down, and a true path where people can move efficiently and hopefully for recreation, as well as moving about to get to work and those sorts of things. Next slide. Again, Vine Street, we are standing at KU. Say we just paid our bill. We're looking back out, and their parking lot is here on the right, and transit center's on the left. Next slide. Here, we are still separating the two uses, but giving more generous open space and plazas where possible. Next slide. Oh, that map doesn't show up at all, but that's okay. So there was a map here, and along that map, it showed you probably about 20 different locations where we see adjacent opportunities. Now, these adjacent opportunities are not funded with our grants and the dollars that have been obligated so far, but we see this as a chance for us to work with our next-door neighbors to make things happen. Next slide. One of those, this is our gateway, Main and Vine. So you can see we're looking at some water features. Next slide. And here, this is the Karst Commons Park. So this is the KU and the LFUCG parking lot. Instead of it being just a blank parking lot, we're looking at more ways to efficiently provide parking within this area with more garages or other ways to incorporate those in order to provide a space for people. Next slide. Another view of the Karst Commons Park as well. And next slide. So I'll wrap this up because I need to pass this on to Allison so I don't take up all the time and let you know where are we. So the Greenway has finished its master plan, and just last week we got our notice to proceed on our phase 2 design. What does that mean? It means we are moving into engineered and construction documents. We will see the final construction documents ending next year. You'll start to see construction next year because we have some sanitary sewer work to start, and you will see the Greenway path itself starting in 2018, really full steam ahead in 2019, and we anticipate full completion by 2021. I might also add that everyone asked, there's a lot of things going on downtown. One of that's the park, which Allison will tell you more about their timeline, but they anticipate that coming after the Greenway is complete. And also the Lexington Center Corporation, Rep Arena, Convention Center, they will have construction going on at the same time. We're all at the table, we're all collaborating on our timelines and ensuring that we work efficiently together. But we ask all the community to bear with us because we know that construction is a lot of fun, but it's going to be well worth it in the end. So I believe that's all I have. Next slide. Now we turn it over to Allison. Thank you.
Thank you. I've worked with many of you in the room. I see your faces out there. For the last decade, I worked at Bluegrass Community Foundation as their general counsel and senior vice president. And so I worked with the Woodford County Community Fund and a number of the nonprofits, including GleanKY, one of my favorites. And so as part of that role at the Community Foundation, we were involved, as she said, in the design competition. And that design competition, she mentioned Kate Orff. And Kate Orff, you might have read in the paper that she recently won a MacArthur Fellow, which is known as the Genius Award, and highlighted in the presentation of her award was Town Branch Commons, and it was a big piece of why she won that and really the brilliance behind what she did from a history and ecological standpoint, using the creek and the history of the place. But really the park is our opportunity, and you can go to the next slide. Oh, did we skip one? That's a good place to start, though, because that's where it's really ugly. Well, we'll start there. We have the opportunity to really transform this space into a world-class park and fully envision the whole
commons project. You know, it's the missing link. The Greenway's fully funded. We're working to fund privately the park. And so the Bluegrass Community Foundation, civic leaders, and a group of mighty philanthropists have come together to create what is called Town Branch Fund. It's currently housed at the Community Foundation. We fully expect that that will evolve over time into a standalone nonprofit that will operate and maintain the park. But really, we are working to transform a sea of parking into a really beautiful, dynamic, one-of-a-kind, world-class green space, not only for Lexington, but we really think it'll serve the region. This unique kind of private partnership is a first for Lexington, but it certainly we have great examples around the country where cities have worked with the private sector to bring about the reality of the project. And so we are really looking to a lot of those examples to learn best practices and also what to avoid, the oopses of their projects, and really get it right this time in Lexington. That shows the footprint of the park. As you can see, not so pretty now, but you can go to the next slide. This is the site plan. We have other versions of the plan that we'll show you, but this really shows you, I don't know if you can read all the labels from where you are, but basically we are taking, the gray area is the new convention center. It will be expanded up to the Jefferson Street Viaduct, and from that point to the Oliver Lewis Bridge will become the new park. It'll have a great lawn, an amphitheater and stage, dog park. The Town Branch Trail actually daylights in the parking lot. It's the only place in downtown Lexington that the creek actually daylights, and so we'll be able to expand that so that it's more accessible for people to enjoy and appreciate and learn from. And so we anticipate great educational programming around the creek itself, which we think will benefit the whole region as it works to clean. You know, as you have awareness of a place and the system and how it works through all of our communities, it has a way of cleaning up creeks. So that's the footprint of the park. You can go on to the next slide. This is a draft of the programming plan. So as Brandi mentioned, we're working with SCAPE to further this design and move forward into the design and engineering stage of this, and plan to do that sometime in 2018. But we've engaged a group called Biederman Redevelopment Ventures, and I don't know if many of you are familiar with Bryant Park in New York, but in the 70s and 80s, it used to be really one of the most dangerous parks in New York City. It's attached to their public library, and they used to call it Needle Park. Well, this group came in, cleaned it up, really focused on the programming that went on in that park. Not big events, but what does an everyday user, how do they interact with the park, and change the face of that park. And so we've engaged this group because we don't just want this to be a beautiful space. We want it to serve people from all over the county and beyond in big ways and small ways. And so they are helping develop our programming plan and a revenue model. This will be, as I said, the first conservancy-based model park in Lexington, and I believe at this point in the region, although I can't say 100% on that. And so it will be self-sustaining. And so they're helping develop that revenue model. We do not expect to get public dollars to operate and maintain this park. And so they're helping us develop that revenue model. And so we're very excited. I mean, this is in its rough stages, but this is just to show you we are going to activate that park from corner to corner. And that doesn't mean there won't be quiet, reflective places. There absolutely will be. But there will be small pockets of activity all over the park where you can find yourself and your interest in that space. And so that's really what we're striving to do. You can turn to the next slide. This really is just, I won't go into this, I know we're running short on time, but we think Town Branch Park has far-reaching benefits, far beyond the obvious of just really beautifying downtown Lexington. Obviously, we think economic development, infill development will be key. It's really hard to live in downtown Lexington today, especially for families, people with pet owners. There's not a proper dog park downtown. This space will have spaces for children and animals. And so it really does make downtown living a more appealing alternative to living outside of the downtown. We are going to offer nearly 200 programming opportunities, and we envision not taking on those as the park. What we are looking to do is really identify nonprofits doing great program already in our community, in our region, and can we highlight that in the park and really make it available to folks who might not be aware of their good work, but also who might not have the ability to get to the programs they're conducting in their own facilities. So we look to partner with nonprofits to really build out that programming plan. And so we believe it will touch on all these things. You can skip. So this is what I thought I was starting with, but it's probably better to start with that ugly parking lot image and then show this. But this is standing on Oliver Lewis Way, the bridge, looking back toward to Rupp Arena. And so the couple is standing on the bridge and they're looking at Rupp. And this is just, we call it the bird's eye view because you're kind of getting a big picture feel. But I don't know how well you all can see it, but you're seeing that bluish green area. That's actually Town Branch Creek and where it daylights. And it'll wind up through the park. You can go to the next phase. This is my personal favorite image that we have. This is an image of the splash pad, so to speak, the potable water source. So the creek, while we think that this project goes a long way between the Greenway and the park, it goes a long way to cleaning up Town Branch Creek. It probably won't be of the quality that we would advocate children swimming around in, and might not be of that depth. So we want to provide really world-class space for children to splash and play in. And you cross over a bridge and then you're into the woodland play area that would be more typical playground area. But as you know, in downtown Lexington, there really isn't great playground area in walking distance. So you come to a farmer's market or you come to an event at Rupp Arena or the Children's Theater. Where do you go from there? This will provide a space for really children to play when they come downtown to do other activities, as well as just a destination in and of itself. Oh, there's our contact. In terms of where we are with this project, we have a great advisory board. They're looking to raise $31 million. We did a fundraising feasibility study about a year ago, and that showed that Lexington and the region had the capacity and affinity to take this project on, so we said we would do that. And that advisory board is chaired by Ann Bacus, is really moving forward with raising those funds. We released the conceptual drawings that you saw today in June, and at that time the advisory board announced an initial collective gift of $5 million. So that really started our fundraising efforts in June, and we're really moving forward. And between the city and LCC and the park board, it's a great partnership and great momentum moving forward. We anticipate that it'll take about 3 years to raise the money, and at the same time we will be working on the design and engineering for the park, and so that when LCC has completed their construction and the Greenway is well underway, then we can start construction on the park. Hopefully it'll be up and running within a 5-year time period. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Our contact information is up there as well, and feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Allison and Brandi, for being here to share the work that you all have. And want to expand this to now multi-regional perspective for a really exciting regional trails development project that is connecting all the way to as far-reaching as Owen County. Our next speaker is Rob Rumpke and Russell Clark. For those who may not be aware, Mr. Rumpke is the executive director of Bluegrass Tomorrow, and I'll leave it to you to share the good details.
Good evening, everybody. Always a delight to be in Woodford County. For those of you who don't know me, I did actually run the Woodford County Chamber of Commerce for a couple of years, back in, I think, 2006 and 7 under a management contract. So I know the community very well. I love the community. I love the farmland, and it's great to be back with you today. So if we want to go to our first slide here, or is this yours, Russ? Go to the next slide. I think you might have the. No, this is yours. Do we want to go with Russ first? Let's go with Russ. Okay, Russ.
Thanks a lot, Rob. Okay, why is the National Park Service here? Well, I represent a division of the Park Service that's called the Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Assistance Program. And the function of our program is to provide free technical planning assistance to local communities who wish to create trails of all types and or conserve land for recreation. Next slide, please. My background, I'm a landscape architect, certified community planner. I've started with the Park Service approximately 6 years ago. I am located out at Mammoth Cave, serving all of Kentucky, and my supervisor in Atlanta now has me serving other states as well. But my objective here with Kentucky is to provide that assistance to bring folks together of all types, make sure we've got the right partners at the table so that the vision that's created to create any type of trail system can sustain itself beyond our involvement. So we provide assistance, our program does, in all communities, whether they're suburban, urban, or rural. And we are basically providing this expertise based on the needs of the individual communities. Next slide, please. So our expertise will be providing conceptual planning, organizational development, all the way through some recommendations on funding. Our program doesn't come with a checkbook, but we can help projects become more fundable. We are working through an application process. All of our applications are due by June 30th. Then they're reviewed in late August, and our fiscal year starts October 1, and at that point we start our new projects throughout the region. How did we get to here? Why am I here in this community today? Next slide. That basically started back in 2012 with a stakeholders group representing Fayette and Scott County, looking at possibility of doing some trail connections, extending out of the Legacy Trail, going north up into Georgetown, on up to Sadieville, which had the desires to become a certified trail town. As a result of that initial stakeholders meeting, a group was formed that was called the Bluegrass Bike, Hike, Horseback Trails Alliance. And that particular organization, through Rob's leadership, had submitted an application to our project, our program, and we then came in the following year and did a 2-day design charrette with the community involvement, community leaders, and the various user groups for the trail types. As a result of that, next slide, we had a plan that was put together that identified how those trail linkages might work, both in Fayette, connecting to the existing trails and proposed trails of Fayette County into Scott County. And a good share of our effort was focused on Scott County because Fayette County was way ahead of the curve on trail planning, both existing built trails and proposed trails. But we wanted to make that interconnectivity with the central spine of the Legacy Trail going north up to the Horse Park on up to Georgetown, heading all the way up to the north end of Scott County. And then where could we loop off from that to create additional opportunities for all types of trails? And in this particular case, we looked at several miles of equestrian trails, working with floodplain areas and obviously with private property owners' permission for that aspect. Next slide. In 2015, Rob approached me about working with a series of counties along the Kentucky River. And we enlisted the help of the University of Kentucky landscape architecture students, and they came forth and actually ran that trail planning workshop and came forth with a variety of great recommendations for this entire region of all types of trails for bicycle touring, equestrian, water trails, historic trails, etc. Next slide. Next slide, please. Okay, great, thank you. And then we were approached after Rob did a presentation here in Woodford County. Folks in Woodford County asked, how can we be part of this regional effort? And so we were asked to come in and do kind of an initial workshop to determine if there was interest in creating a trail system for Woodford and Franklin County. We had a tremendous turnout and a great workshop, a lot of great ideas, and that led to another application to come forth for phase 2 trail planning here in the Bluegrass region, which we've been working on for the past 2 years. Next slide, please. And as a result of that initial workshop, Owen County asked if they could be included. So we focused on Woodford, Franklin, and Owen County starting 2 years ago, I'm sorry. And these are some of the images from that particular workshop. Next slide. And as a result of those efforts, that has brought us to the point of today, where basically yesterday we unveiled, next slide please, the recommendations for the 5-county area of trail connectivity. And next slide please. But before we actually, I'm sorry, I forgot about that slide. There were many, many meetings with the committee level trying to decipher through all of the information that was collected during the trail planning workshops. And each of the workshop information pieces that we did, we broke groups based on trail interest for equestrian, bicycle touring, hiking, etc. And they looked at the 3 counties and provided specific recommendations. Then I took that information back and created a composite map of all the recommendations, and that led into a series of ideas that started being generated on these maps for the committee to review. And there were numerous community meetings here reviewing the details, the spreadsheets of information that were collected, etc. Next slide. That brought us to the point of the unveiling of the 5-county area master plan yesterday that was held here in the Frankfurt area. This represents a lot of effort on the part of a grassroots group, and it is something that I am very proud to be part of. The effort here identifies potential trailheads, it identifies water trails, it identifies equestrian trails, hiking trails, mountain bike trails, and bicycle touring trails. And one thing you need to recognize when you start seeing the numbers that I'm going to be presenting here, how many miles this represents. Bicycle touring uses the current roads, and those guys go out and do 100 miles in the crack of a whip. So they consume a lot of miles into their program, unlike hikers who go a slower amount of miles in a day's time. Next slide. The number one priority that came out of this effort, I asked each of the counties to form a committee to analyze the data, and I come up with the ranking of what their number one project priority would be out of all the things that were represented in each of the counties. So Woodford committee got together, and Franklin County committee got together, and lo and behold, their number one priority was the exact same route, 421 connecting Frankfurt to Town Branch. It's the primary route of this recommendation for the 5-county area. So great to see we're able to tie together real quickly here with the efforts taking place in Lexington. Next slide. We're also taking advantage of the historic aspects. This is the eastern route of Lewis and Clark, traverses through the area. Next slide. must have lost some slides in there. Okay, well, one of the key aspects that I would like to take away here is is there another slide after that one, sir? Okay. All right, we'll move on to the next slide, and Rob will cover these in detail. Next slide. Here we've got a representation of Owen County showing the primary. These are slides I put together today. Back up 4 slides, please. Okay. Back up one more. No, you're going the wrong way. Going the wrong way. You're going to go the other way? Okay. We start from here. Next slide. I have so many photographs in this file. It's a huge file. So next slide. This is the 5-county master plan. Next slide. And then this is the #1 priority that's been recommended by the committees through the effort of both Franklin and Woodford counties, connecting Frankfort all the way to Town Branch. Next slide. We have the overlay of the Lewis and Clark historic route through the area of 1806, 1809. And I know some of these same slides are on your presentation. Next slide. And Franklin County, this is the overall image for Franklin County. Next slide. Owen County, this is showing the multi-use spine 127. They also have extensive water trail recommendations on the Kentucky River and several bicycle touring routes identified in their plan. Next slide. And Woodford County identifying their overall general recommendations. And part of that process was identifying key assets in the area as well as doing a SWOT analysis. And all that information is compiled into this plan. Next slide. So these are the numbers that we came up with, ladies and gentlemen. The 5-county area is proposing over 1,800 miles of trails. And this is going to be a dynamic impact on the area long-term economically, health, as well as just the opportunity to get outdoors locally. Next slide. So in moving forward from this point, this is not the end, this is the new beginning. We have a recommendation on where trails should go in the 5-county area. Now we need your support to help move this vision forward and have those plans moved into the local comprehensive master plans so that those ideas carry on to the next generation. And we're planting that seed with this particular effort. And we are going to pass this legacy on to our children. Next slide. So as we see it with the Rivers and Trails Conservation Assistance Program, our mission for the future is basically this: a network of parks, rivers, trails, and greenways and open spaces that promote quality of life and link people to their local and natural heritage. Again, locally. So with that, I would like to conclude with this comment. This local grassroots effort is laying the foundation for a connectivity legacy for future generations. The Bluegrass region is going to become a trails hub over time. How is that going to happen? One of my other projects I'm working on right now, the 140-mile Boone Trace Trail from Cumberland Gap National Historic Park to Fort Boonesborough. The route's all identified. There's an existing motorized route in place. This past year, we've done 5 trail planning workshops in the 5 counties, and we've identified a bicycle route and a hiking route for the Boone Trace. So there's a trail coming up from Cumberland Gap, which was the original road corridor, Boone Trace, Wilderness Road, the original road into Kentucky, following that corridor coming towards Lexington. Once that hits Fort Boonesborough, across the Kentucky River, we've got both Clark County and Fayette County connecting into the heart of the Bluegrass area. One of the other projects I'm working on in the north end of Scott County is Grant County. Grant County has already identified a 48-mile trail corridor paralleling 75 from the north end to the south end. Grant County was recently added into the Green Umbrella Trails organization for the greater Cincinnati area. They are working on a trail route coming from Cincinnati down to Grant County. Your grandchildren should have the opportunity to hike and bike from Cincinnati to Cumberland Gap. So that north-south spine right through the heart of Bluegrass will be a critical link for all types of trail users. In addition to that, US Bike Route 21 is coming north, which is the bicycle touring route being laid out through the US Bike Route group right now. Is coming up from Tennessee, right through, following back and forth across Boone Trace for the historical aspects, coming into the Lexington area and heading up to Cincinnati. It crosses the transcontinental bicycle route in Berea that goes from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. That particular bike route already draws people from all over the world to bicycle here in Kentucky. Now we're going to be able to bring them with Route 21 north and south into the Lexington area. So you're beginning to see the picture that Lexington's going to be another hub again of trails. That's where you started, and that's where you're going to come back to. In the future, with 421 being the #1 recommendation out of this effort, getting us from downtown Lexington over to Frankfort, we just need to jump over to Louisville. Hit the 100-mile loop around Louisville, and we've connected Louisville, Frankfort, Midway, Woodford County, into Lexington, north-south Boone Trace corridors. Huge opportunity there. Another project that's coming forth for me to be looking at in the future is the John Muir 1,000-mile walk from Indiana through Kentucky. And it comes right down from the 100-mile loop around Louisville, down to Mammoth Cave, and on down into Tennessee. So with the historic routes that we have here in Kentucky, tying in the regional aspect of connectivity, we have some capabilities here in the future for our children and grandchildren to be tremendous economic draws, as well as healthy outdoor recreational activities. Thank you.
Great job, Russ. You know, one thing that you probably don't know is really all the work and the personal sacrifice over the last really 4.5, 5 years that Russ has been working in this state, and specifically working with the Bluegrass region. One of the other projects, the Kentucky River Water Trail Alliance, and Russ has actually been out helping to build stairs for portages around dams and things like that. So it goes well beyond what he's paid to do by the National Park Service and the Rivers Trails Conservation Assistance Program. So our relationship with Russ, we've had a 2-year relationship on the Woodford Franklin Owen County project, which just recently ended. But we'll talk about how we're going to try to re-engage Russ here in a little bit. So let's pull up my slides. Russ actually stole a bunch of my slides, so I can be brief and just sit back down if you like, but there are a few things I can talk about here. So let's, we just had our rollout yesterday. These are some of the great sponsors that are involved with our Bluegrass Forever Green series. Bluegrass Forever Green, Russ mentioned the green umbrella up in Cincinnati, greater Cincinnati area. Bluegrass Forever Green is what we are calling it, and it is the umbrella of everything relating to conservation, preservation, and sustainability in the Bluegrass region, which includes trail building. It includes, if you've heard of some of our river blast events that we've had around the region, it includes going back to the roots of Bluegrass Tomorrow, which really, when Toyota was being built in 1989, Bluegrass Tomorrow was formed. Some fine people here in Woodford County were a part of that, including Robert Clay and some others. And it was really to preserve our precious bluegrass soils and our farmland, which is so important to us in this whole region and here in Woodford County. Bluegrass Forever Green is at the roots of all that, in our sustainable bluegrass soils is what makes sustainability in the bluegrass region so much different. So all of these sponsors are involved with us. If you don't know, I think you know most of those companies, but Stantec is the dam builders on the Kentucky River. So let's go to the next slide. I mentioned Bluegrass Forever Green and what we're doing. One of the things that's really important that I wanted to touch on here are conversations with the region series that have gone on over 2 years. At the top of that, the Trails and Greenways Summit that we had in August of last year brought together all the counties in the Bluegrass region down in Garrett County at the Lancaster Grand Theater. We had a water summit on water infrastructure and the cleanliness of our water in November of 2016. Our energy innovations conversation in March of 2017, and a lot of conversation there about solar power and solar farms and all the things that are really beginning to even change our landscape in the Bluegrass region, and will continue to, was a part of that discussion. And the most important one to date was on September the 29th, and it was at the Georgetown College Conference Center, a land use planning conversation with the region. And it was really, what was most important about that event, I wanted to, and Woodford Forward has been a great partner in this. The Bluegrass Area Development District, Bluegrass Green Source, Bluegrass Land Conservancy, Fayette Alliance, and Woodford Forward were the partners on this project, on this conversation. And coming out of this, it might surprise you, okay? What people thought about and the stakeholders who were at this meeting. And there were a couple of principles that were developed at that meeting that I think will affect our future here in the Bluegrass for a long, long time. Number one, there's a fundamental need for responsible land use planning in the Bluegrass region. That might seem obvious, but it's not when you've got developers in the room and when you've got lots of other sources in the room. Number two, a broad-based shared regional planning commission should be formed to guide future planning efforts in the region. Preserving agricultural lands and limiting sprawl is of great importance to the region already, as these concepts are already contained in 15 of 18 county or joint county comprehensive plans in the Bluegrass. Stites and Harbison helped us with that research. So all of these plans are already saying our precious Bluegrass soils and agricultural soils are extremely important. And thirdly, there's a fundamental need for better communication in the region between cities, counties, and planners and elected officials. And we tend to plan in silos, and I think we all know that. How do we begin to communicate a whole lot better? And we hope that Bluegrass Tomorrow can be right in the middle of that. We have some steps coming up. We have a meeting coming up next Wednesday, in fact, here at Woodford Forward. We're continuing the process. We're going to meet with the all of the Planning Commission members and planners at the Bluegrass Area Development District in January and really begin to move this forward. There are several other principles that began to be developed at this event that aren't ready for publication yet, but we're going to be working on those principles. And if we can begin with certain principles of agreement in the Bluegrass region, it'll take us many steps down the road towards perhaps even someday comprehensive planning in the region. So we're really excited about this, and this gets back to the roots of why Bluegrass Tomorrow was formed. Coming up, and we were talking about food a little bit earlier, but a local food and agriculture conversation in the region is coming up on December the 8th, just next Friday, and it is going to be at the new Bluegrass Stockyards. And DeRay and Friends is the They run the eatery out at the Bluegrass Stockyards, and they're going to cater lunch, so it's going to be a great event. Commissioner Ryan Quarles is going to be the keynote speaker. We're doing our keynote a little bit different at that event in that he is going to be speaking at the end of the event at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So he's going to be there for a good portion of the day listening to all of the working groups and all of the roundtable discussions and to the panelists and really responding to that with his keynote presentation. So I'm really excited about that. Coming up next year, we're going to do a conversation with the region on transportation. We're going to do one on arts, one on health and wellness. So we're really hitting all of the important quality of life issues in our Bluegrass region and how can we work together as an 18-county region. Our Bluegrass Tomorrow footprint, by the way, is the first tier of counties around Lexington and the second tier. So that's why 18 counties. So let's go on to the next slide. So getting back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier, and some of these figures are the same, so I won't spend much time on them. But what is most important is that we are looking at more than just pedestrian and bicycle traffic. We are looking at horseback. We are looking at water. We are looking at historic trails. Received some good news this morning. I don't know if it's public yet, but I can say that there's a great chance for the first public access to the Kentucky River in Woodford County coming down the pike pretty soon. So we're really excited about that. Let's go to the next slide. So the 5-county proposed new bike trails. You can't see that too well in here, but all of the brown lines are proposed new bicycle trails in the region. Go to the next slide. And then you've got the proposed 5-county multi-use trails. And when we say multi-use, it might be using initially existing roadway and right-of-way on existing roadway. But in the future, it might also include getting off of that road onto specific bike paths or pedestrian paths like you saw in Lexington. I got a question earlier about how do we get from Woodford County and Versailles to Lexington, and US 60 is one of these proposed 5-county multi-use trails getting back into Lexington, and of course 421 is as well. So let's go to the next slide. The 5-county proposed water trails, and you see some of the priorities. I just mentioned the need for easement and access on the Kentucky River, South Elkhorn, Glens Creek. There's currently no public access, only private access in Woodford County. Franklin priorities, more access in Pool 4 of the Kentucky River and more access on the Elkhorn Creek. And Owen priorities, if you've not been to Owen County, visit it. And Dan has a wonderful PowerPoint presentation that he goes through 3,000 slides in about 2 minutes. So we could bring him up here and do that one for you. But Gratz, Blue Wing Landing, Lockport, Monterey are all focal points in Owen County. Let's move on to the next slide. And you saw this slide before, the 421 corridor. We're really excited about that. When you get outside of Fayette County and Leestown Road, when you drive out Leestown Road out of Fayette County, you can't really even imagine how a trail could go along some of those areas. It's pretty tight and tough. But if we can get the Town Branch Trail to the county line, we can come back at you, because 421 the rest of the way there's quite a bit of easement and right-of-way that is usable, and it's really a pretty road. And in Franklin County, in fact, I can't remember the amount of miles, but there's half of it's already built, but it's about a 10-mile stretch. So there's a 10-mile stretch in Franklin County that is already built because of a road project in Franklin County that's coming back at Fayette County. So it's a matter of connecting the dots. So let's move to the next one. So here's where it goes through Frankfort on the yellow line. The next slide. And, you know, it only tips Woodford County, but that's also where it connects to Scott County. on the 421 corridor, but it does, it's right outside of Midway, and there's some big plans for trails around Midway as well, and I know there's a number of Midway folks in the room here tonight. Let's go to the next slide. And the Lewis and Clark Historic Trail. Thanks for stealing that slide, Russ. You know, as a matter of fact, after we were done yesterday, we both went up to the main computer and stole both of our presentations. So I didn't steal any of his slides. I didn't have time. I was in meetings all day today. Let's go to the next slide. And here you see, again in brown, the proposed Owen County bike trails. Go ahead, next slide. And the proposed multi-use trails. And that's using the 127 corridor all the way down to Frankfurt. So you can see how that would play into things in terms of connecting everyone. Next slide. And the most important thing relating to Owen County is really developing the water trails. It's one of the most beautiful stretches of the Kentucky River there in Owen County. Next, please. And this is the Franklin County map that Russ already talked about. Next slide. And the proposed trailhead locations, if you're familiar with Frankfurt, Cove Spring Park, Capitol View Park, US 421 at the Good Shepherd Church, and the Old Taylor Distillery are focal points for trailheads. Let's go to the next map. And the multi-use priorities there in Franklin County, again, US 421, developing the Glens Creek, McCracken Pike to the Woodford County line, so that comes right to Woodford County. US 60 multi-use trail, to include that in their upcoming road project up there, and the US 460 Schweitzer Road to Scott County trail. Next. And here's Woodford County. If you look at the maps on the side here, you can look at them afterwards if you want, but it has all the SWOT points up there too, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, and they're all identified, as well as all the great cultural and historic resources in the county. So they were all identified as part of this discussion, and I know you can't read it on there. Go to the next slide. All of this stuff will be up on our website, by the way, at bluegrasstomorrow.org very soon. So we'll be getting that stuff up, maybe even this weekend. So the Woodford proposed bike trail priorities, again, the US 421 multi-use trail from Midway to Franklin County and Lexington, a bike touring route from Woodford County Park to Anderson County, along US 62, connecting to the existing Bourbon Trail. So that's already using existing road, but need for signage and bike laning and that sort of thing. And then a US 62 multi-use trail from Versailles to Midway. That would be another way to get to Lexington the long way, is to go to Midway first and then get 421 and back into the town branch. Next slide. So the proposed trailhead locations here, and there are many, the Buckley Wildlife Center, the Castle and Key Distillery, Millville Community Center, downtown Midway, Weisenberger Mill has been obviously controversial up to this point, but in fact, one of the takeaways from the meeting, we have an upcoming meeting with District 7 to talk about this whole plan and to talk about the trailheads and all these kinds of things. So hopefully that'll be a really collaborative discussion. Equus Run Winery, Falling Springs, and the Heart and Horizon Farm on Fords Mill Road. So pretty much spans the county. Next slide. Proposed equestrian. You can't see it too well on there, but it's the green lines. And there really is quite a bit of equestrian planning going on in the Bluegrass region right now. But this idea is to run a multi-use horse trail from the Woodford County Park to the Life Adventure Center, and then proceeding north through Clifton, along the Kentucky River to Millville and the Buckley Wildlife Center. The recommended trailhead here would be the Life Adventure Center. I would elaborate just a little bit more in saying that these proposed trails would lead right up into Owen County. Owen County would have an opportunity to connect with Scott. And in Scott, one of the things that we have planned, besides the Legacy Trail going north for pedestrians and bicycles, the plan is to plan for horses and horseback riding and even a development of horse camping at the north end of the Kentucky Horse Park. And run those trails all the way up to Sadieville. Sadieville already being identified as a quaint little bike and horseback trail town. So there's lots of big vision going on here and lots of plans that are being put into place. These things can all be connected. Masterson Station Park can be part of that connection in the future as well. Next slide. And the multi-use trails, we've talked about these a lot already. We did not talk about Old Frankfort Pike, but that is in the plan. That will be a challenge. And these are all major connecting trail corridors to our entire region. Next slide. So other key master plan recommendations. The master plan will be online as well here very shortly. Government advocacy, including the strengthening of KRS 411, which is to strengthen liability language in that statute, and developing more incentive opportunities. There's a separate committee that's working on incentive opportunities. Weisenberger Mill continuing to advocate for a trailhead there and at least share the road kind of thinking with the new bridge. And then consistent trail signage throughout the entire system of Bluegrass. We did develop a logo. We are calling this the Bluegrass Trails Alliance now because it got pretty confusing when you said Bike, Hike, Horseback, Water Trails Alliance. But we did that originally so that people would understand that there are it's not motorized trails. It's not driving and it's not four-wheeling. It is otherwise. The water trails focus on prioritizing Lock and Dam number 5 and completion of that, and then portages for Lock and Dams 3, 4, and 5, so that those on kayaks and canoes can get around those dams right now, and it's difficult right now for them to do that. And then marketing and promotion, we are working to develop a Bluegrass Trails app, much like the Waze app, which can get you from point A to point B, but we want to tell people all the wonderful places to eat and sleep and where the next trailhead is and that sort of thing. We're already starting a prototype with CDP Engineering with all the mapping that we have so far, and they're doing that for free so far. I don't know how long that's going to go. And then a hike, bike, water safety awareness plan is part of the master plan. Developing Trail Town certifications. Some are started, some are midway through, and some haven't started at all. But our recommendations are Midway, Versailles, Monterey, Gratz, Millville, and Frankfort. And the only trail town in our whole region right now is Sadieville, but it doesn't have a trail going to it yet because we haven't finished them. So they can't be totally certified until there are at least horseback trails going from the reservoir property up there to Sadieville. And then there are whole sections in the plan on outreach, landowner cultivation, and funding. So it's been a complete process. Next slide. And so what's next? Russ talked about some big vision. We already talked about this project that we did 2 years ago. It was a short project, but the students, the landscape architecture students, fifth-year students in the College of Agriculture did a wonderful job on this project and gave us some great vision to look at. So our next application to Russ and the National Park Service is going to be for all of the Kentucky River counties. Obviously, Woodford would be included in that. Next slide. And these are some of the other counties that we really haven't worked in yet. Mercer, Garrett, Jessamine, Madison, Clark, Estill would all be included in that planning along the Kentucky River. And if you are familiar with the Little Miami River Trail up in Ohio, that's sort of our vision for Kentucky, to have trail all along the Kentucky River. So next slide. And these are just some of the attractions along the Kentucky River Blueway Trail system that were identified in that process. Russ, there's going to be another application coming your way, and we've actually already talked about that. So that completes my presentation. Everything will be up online at bluegrasstomorrow.org within a matter of days. So please, if you have any questions or comments, let me know.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate you all being here to share with us about the formerly the longest acronym I've known. So congrats on the shortening. But this 1,800-mile project is really ambitious and exciting. But it couldn't be a more appropriate time for us to hear this evening. As some of you may be aware, Woodford County is in the process of our comprehensive plan drafting. The commissioners, some of which were here tonight. I really encourage you all to meet with Rob and Russ after we close this and look at the maps, so we share this vision with other Woodford Countyans in the coming weeks. Our next speakers are Alex and Emily Schmidt-Riddle. We are so fortunate to be here tonight. Thanks to the Riddle family for inviting us. If you haven't met them, this is a great opportunity to meet them this evening. They've got some exciting news to share with you all about a redevelopment project, not only where we stand here, the property that's under contract with their real estate investment partners, but also with the Amsden building. So I welcome Alex and Emily to close out the presentations for us.
So it's interesting for us to be here because the whole thing is about planning, and that's certainly not my strong suit. We are much more, I'm much more of a doer, think first and ask questions later, so that's why I married a planner. So we're here and just wanted to talk a little bit about what we're doing. I have 3 slides. It's all pictures. That helps me a lot. So I hope everybody can kind of hang with us for a little bit and talk. And if you guys have any questions, I think one of the reasons that we're here is to kind of invite all the speakers up at the end to answer some questions as well. So if anybody has any questions once we're done, please stick around and we'll be answering all those as well. So what we wanted to talk about is really just kind of what we're doing. There we go. The first time we ever decided to buy a building was kind of on a whim. I don't think we made the decision. I think I liked it and thought it was cool and bought it and then told Emily to make it work. So she's the brains of the operation and also the looks of the operation, and I just kind of do things, and she keeps up. So we bought the Amsden building in March, is that right? In March of this year. We had our opening on Saturday for the coffee shop in the mercantile section, which we'll talk about a little bit. But our vision for this county and for this town really starts pretty much exactly where we're sitting. It starts in this Court Street sector. If you've ever seen something and just kind of known that it was right, I think that's how we felt when we started looking at the Amsden building and then on around this Court Street sector. Long before, and long to me is relative, I think it was about 3 weeks before we decided to put an offer in on these buildings. We were joking around with City Councilwoman Dake about how we wanted to buy the churches next, and little did we know we would have the opportunity. And so we got that opportunity and have put these under contract. Actually, our investor is sitting in the crowd as well, Jordan Kite. So he's our partner on these 3 buildings. And he drove all the way up from Charleston to be here tonight as well for this. So he also has tickets to the Monday Night Football game, so it wasn't all this. But the Amsden building is really our first project, and it's really built around Emily's brand and what she does. And the first phase was a coffee shop and a mercantile, which we got open last week. And so the coffee shop is just that. It's a coffee shop. It's somewhere. It's a half a mile from my house. I needed a place that I could walk and sit down with the computer and grab a cup of coffee, and it was driving me crazy that I didn't have that locally. So I will let Emily talk a little bit about the mercantile vision for that building as well.
Yeah, so the mercantile space includes a lot of items that I deal in vintage stuff. So I go out and find unique things, reclaimed things. But I also have 10 to 12 local vendors in the mercantile that kind of have their own individual spaces. So it's a little more than just wholesale. They have the ability to decorate their space and restock and add new items whenever they want and really take ownership of their space as well. We're also going to do a lot of events and workshops highlighting our different vendors and letting them interact with customers and teach about what they do or teach a class. And we've had 2 signups for those so far, and they sold out within minutes. So we're looking to do a lot more of that kind of stuff and just kind of really create a community feel in the Amsden building overall.
Yeah, and so I think one of the big reasons we wanted to be here is that we feel like Versailles is ready. And Versailles is our little section of Versailles. I like to think about this little Court Street section is kind of poised and it's ready. And we just want to really thank everybody who came out on Saturday. It was wild. It was an absolutely crazy time. I don't think I left the cash register for 14 hours, and I wasn't planning on working. I told Emily on the way down, I was like, if you see me start to do something or work, you tell me to stop it, because my job is to welcome people and say hello. And I worked all 14 hours straight, and so did Emily. So it was a lot of fun, and what we wanted to do was basically provide very limited services in very limited areas so that it could kind of help support all businesses down here. So our coffee shop offers, I think, 2 types of baked good. So if you want food, yeah, gonna have to go somewhere else. And that was part of the deal. That was part of the idea. Is we want to create a reason for a useful walk in downtown Versailles. I've become a huge urban planning and downtown planning nerd lately. It's never something that I thought I was going to get into. I actually sell drugs for a living. I have a full-time day job, but I got really interested in it because it matters now. All of a sudden it's very important and it matters to us. So to create a useful walk, to have somebody walk from wherever they are to come grab a cup of coffee, and then walk from there to go get lunch, and then walk from there to go shopping, I think is something that's very important for downtown Versailles. And one of the biggest questions that we've gotten, and Emily will probably roll her eyes, is well, aren't you concerned about parking? And I am not at all concerned about parking. So just to answer that question now, parking is not one of the things that I'm concerned about in life. And I think that we're in a great spot. We have tons of parking in downtown. We just need to give people something that's worth walking to, and people will walk. And so that's kind of our vision behind the Amsden. The most exciting thing, the thing that we got asked about the most, is the bourbon bar. We have a little cocktail bar. Bourbon bar is kind of a misnomer, but bourbon is a great brand right now, so we're going to lean into that. So it's a Prohibition era cocktail bar. It's going to be heavy on bourbon. We're going to feature a lot of rare bourbons. We're going to do a lot of sampling events. I think one thing that Emily and I have both realized is that events are going to be very necessary for us and for downtown. Is to do events to bring people in on nights that people wouldn't normally be out and about and doing things. So that's something that's really important to us. And actually, one of Emily's vendors is sitting in the back as well, so we appreciate the support from the mercantile vendors. But then we have a yoga studio that's opening up upstairs as well. We have a boutique that's already open upstairs as well. And then the final space, we're kind of debating between using it for storage for us, because our vendors currently have no storage, or bringing in another brand. The coolest thing is how fast we filled up our building. It's really, really easy. I think if you provide people a space that they want to be and that they want to be in, and you're willing to take the steps to keep it nice and to keep it up, there are a lot of people who want to be in Woodford County, who want to be in Versailles, selling goods or doing work or doing business. And so that's kind of one of the things that we leaned into. Like I said, we don't do this for a living. We do this because we love it. And one day, if my dad decides I'm not doing a good job and fires me, we can always step into this full time. But for right now, we want to create a good spot for people to work. So moving on, our next big project, the next big thing in the pipeline is where we're sitting right now. So we are under contract on these buildings. So we're under contract on this one and the two next door, and really wanted to use these buildings as a place to create communal spaces for people to go, spaces for people to hang out, and again, selfishly, spaces that we want in Versailles. So pizza and beer is something that I felt like was very important, a place where you can sit down and eat pizza and drink beer. So that's something that we're pursuing very aggressively for one of these buildings. Pizza and beer gets them every time, right? So that's one of the things that we're pursuing really, really aggressively in these spaces is a good pizza spot with a great craft beer selection. And we've been able to, and maybe I'm spoiled, in our first building we pigeonholed and we picked exactly what we wanted in each space and we were able to find it. So I am not at the point yet in my life where I'm willing to compromise that. So we are pigeonholed in for pizza and beer right now. If it ends up being something else in beer, I'm probably okay with that too. And then we've actually got some really exciting stuff going on Saturday. They're doing an open house for the art space that we're hoping is going to go into what is currently the office building. So that's the building all the way on the right side. So they're doing an open house on Saturday for that building in conjunction with the Christmas parade, and at the same time, so people can really walk through that space and feel what it's going to feel like to have working artists here. There's 230 working artists in Woodford County right now. And so that's something that we wanted to really provide an opportunity for those people to have a space to work. Everybody wants to get out of the house, right, and go to work. I know I do. After our opening this weekend, I was so happy to go to my cushy day job. So I think people want a reason to get out of the house and go to work. And this will give them a space that they can go, but it'll also give them an outlet for their art. So we'll have gallery spaces as well, and I say we very loosely. Councilwoman Dake has actually taken a very active role in this, and she's aggressively pursuing this vision, and I know she's put a great team together that they're aggressively pursuing that vision, and we are wholeheartedly in support of that. And then for this building, if you want to click to the next slide, for this building we're thinking of a downtown event space. So I have to be completely honest, I stole this slide. We are on a committee for a downtown pavilion and event space, and this slide kind of worked for what I was trying to show, and architects and renderers are expensive, so I stole the slide. So this is where we're standing right now. So you're looking at a great view of Big Spring Park directly behind us, and then a balcony space off the side that'll overlook that grassy area, and hopefully tie in to that grassy area and parking. So that's the vision for this space, and we really want to be able to pull people into downtown Versailles to have events so that they can see it, and then they'll look around and realize everything else that's great about downtown Versailles. We talk about it all the time. It's not that there's nothing in Versailles. It's that we have to showcase it. There's so much good stuff in Versailles. I see there are shop owners in here. There are business people in here that have done a great job of creating those businesses, and we're just excited to be a part of that and to show it off. And so we're really excited to be here. And I don't really have any sort of big downtown planning spiel other than the fact that we're happy and we want to create places that we like, and we hope you guys like them too. So if you guys ever get a chance to swing by and grab a cup of coffee, we'd love to serve you, and I'll probably be able to find you a bourbon here in the next month or so as well. So if you guys have any questions, I think we'll call all the speakers up to the front, and everybody can kind of have a seat here, and then I think Chase is going to field questions moving forward. Sorry, I talk really fast, too.
Thank you, Alex. Well, we'd like to offer questions up for our great presenters tonight. If you're willing to come up here to the mic, that would be fantastic. I think the Methodist Church approves you to shout it from the pews as well, so your choice. But again, can we get a round of applause for this great panel? So want to thank everybody for being here, and especially for all the presenters tonight. These topics are a bit by design. This really came out of a 2015 study that Woodford Ford commissioned with the Matrix Group that found that over 1,500 respondents here in Woodford County found 5 top priorities that they thought were the issues facing Woodford County. And if let me share those with you. The redevelopment of vacant land and property within the urban service area, improvements to our basic infrastructure services, protecting key agricultural areas from development, encouraging more locally grown food products and growing the agriculture economy, and attracting new businesses like what we just heard from tonight. So I hope that you would ask some questions for them while we have these experts in the room, and I guess I'll lead off if anyone doesn't have a question. But I'm curious about the Lexington project, about the public-private partnerships. Are you all dealing with any significant challenges right now with the downtown property owners next door to the project? And if there's any advice as to how to really create these partnerships with so many stakeholders involved.
Test.
Working? Can you hear me? Yeah? Okay, great. I'll stand back here by Allison so that she can talk with me. That's a great question, and it's always a challenge, no matter what your project is. And I feel like whether you're rural, suburban, or urban, you always have a neighbor, and everybody has an opinion. And so what is best is to always be proactive, and at the beginning, reach out to those people and get them at the table to at least tell them about the vision and get them to buy into the vision. Now, granted, that's not always how it works in a perfect world, or there's some things you just don't see that come down the road. And so one thing that's been publicly available that I'll speak to is we have worked recently closely with the fund, with Lexington Center Corporation, and Main Street Baptist Church in downtown Lexington. And part of our project is to remove the Jefferson Street Viaduct Bridge. And the concern was dealing with historically, the church has utilized the parking that has been the vast parking lot behind Rupp Arena. We understand that is a concern of the church, and not only just the church, but the other businesses who are nearby and adjacent to the park. Parking is always the question. That's why I clapped when you said we're not worried about parking. But it's a reality we all live in. We all drive, we all park, and then we all visit somewhere. So we have to think about that. And so, granted, keep this in mind. I was part of the Town Branch project many years ago when it started. I went away, and I've recently come back in the mayor's office. So this is one of my first challenges coming on board. And to get to know the folks at Main Street Baptist, it's really about getting at the table. We're all people. We all have our certain agendas that we need to achieve, but we all were just open and tried to be as collaborative as possible. And in the end, I hope, and I know that we have reached a solution in regards to the property the city owns, that we can work in a manner that is as supportive of everyone around Jefferson Street. Now, I say that as an example, and I don't want to talk too long, but the goal is just talk, get everyone at the table, be as communicative as you can, and it's not easy all the time. So that's all I have to say.
I don't really have much to add to that, but I'll just say, I've often said that this project, because there aren't a lot of examples out there to follow, especially locally, that it's been a roller coaster ride. I mean, it truly has. I mean, it's been up and down and all around, and sometimes I'm hanging upside down. But from the beginning, at the beginning, I really felt like at any time we could derail. Now I just know it's a hump and we got to get over it. And I think the best advice for these public-private partnerships is just keep going. Just keep going and working through what comes your way, because things will come your way that you cannot even envision. And the conversation, the we have a great working relationship with the city, and they've had great people at the table, and so that has been a tremendous asset to the project, but keep going.
Any questions? One from, yeah.
I actually have a question for almost everybody, but one, my name's Dan Brigno. I've been living in Woodford County now for 21 years. I actually work in Owen County, and the reason Owen County is on the map is because of the engagement that occurred here in Woodford County, to let everybody know. My first statement is to Stephanie. I'd like to talk to you about Owen County, because we've lost the only factory, 700 jobs. We've lost our hospital this year. So we have a lot of agricultural opportunities. The second thing is to Lexington, to both of you. I'm just curious, because you mentioned the 2021 completion date. Does that include the hole that's in the center of town right now? Will that be completed at the same time you're going to finish this?
That's a great question. And as part of, I'll say this is kind of leaning toward what Chase led to, is we have a lot of private development adjacent to this path. And so we cannot specifically speak to their timeline. However, we work with them closely and are at the table with them as our paths cross, which of course it does. And they are on a track moving forward is all I can say, and that it's moving quicker than I even imagined. So they're kind of pushing us ahead in some cases. So 2021, I don't know if they'll have their entire block completed by 2021, but I know that they have said that they will have at least some parcels or some components of that block completed, because they want us to have the Town Branch Trail, that path in front of them done, so they can open up shop. So
Great. The last question is to Alex. Well, actually, to both of you. I'm also the Trail Town Coordinator and the Main Street Coordinator for Owenton in Owen County. And I'm interested to know if you took any historic credits, financing credits, to remodel that building. And if you have any plans for any kind of incubation stores in your project as you move through, because this is obviously not going to be the last time that you would do an investment either in for sales or someplace else. And I was just curious if you had any plans for incubator stores for up-and-coming artists or retailers. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, so the historic credits is an interesting question right now with those looking like they might go away. We are applying for historic credits. We don't have a full CO in our building right now, so we don't have a full certificate of occupancy yet. We're about 5/6 of the way there. So we are actually looking at applying for our historic credits after the fact. So the historic credits to us were always a bonus, and that's how we've looked at them. And we really wanted to get the doors open. We wanted to get Emily and her vendors in there. We wanted to start slinging coffee. And we wanted to get the doors open without having to jump through those hurdles. And we have additional investors in that building as well. And all of us kind of came together and said, the historic credits are a bonus. Let's push forward. And they really supported us in that decision. So we start applying for those historic credits. Actually, the paperwork is filled out. We start submitting those applications next week. So it's bad timing for us with them possibly going away for next year. But again, it's a bonus, and we're looking at it that way. The nice thing is, again, I think if you give people a space that you would be happy working in, they will support you. And so the building cash flows on its own without the tax credits. And we have great banking relationships that have helped us get there. So we're really happy to not need those. And I understand that that's very important for a lot of other people in downtown. As far as incubators, it's definitely something that we have thrown around. It's definitely something that is still top of mind for the current project and for future projects. It's not something that we have set in stone, that we've said this is where that's going, but it is something that we're interested in. And I know Laura and her group are seeing themselves as an artist incubator. They are going to be doing some business classes and some classes out of that space. And and that's what they see their space as. So that will be starting up. We're hoping in the next couple months, and then as far as future incubators, that'll be for future conversations. I think with our investment team and with those people. All right.
We will talk Owen County for sure.
So I wanted to mention that congratulations to you guys and the commitment to downtown Versailles. I have felt for a long time that there's great opportunity here. And when I was working here at the Chamber of Commerce, and I'm not sure we really pushed that bill hard enough, but there's so many people that drive through Versailles and never come into downtown Versailles every day, going over to Frankfurt, going to Keeneland. I think that Midway has done a really nice job getting a lot of that market to come into downtown Midway, so congratulations to them. But I think Versailles has an amazing opportunity. It's such a lovely downtown, lovely storefronts, and just thank you for coming. Are there other questions, comments from the crowd?
Well, if not, I want to thank again the panel for being here this evening. This has been incredibly informative, and I want to thank all the attendees tonight for joining us. And if Spark Community Cafe would care to speak, I also want to give you all the floor as we close here tonight. If there's any exciting news that you all would like to share as we know that the project that is underway at Spark Community Cafe is another key cog in the wheel for creating more vibrancy here in downtown Versailles. So Kyle Fannin and the Spark Community Cafe team is here. So thank you, panel.
Okay. Most of you probably know that a group of students decided about a year ago that they wanted to do something about food insecurity in Woodford County. And thank you to the Glean folks for explaining very well what that is. And it's been quite a year, and I want to let the kids tell you about it.
Okay, well, we can start from the very beginning, I assume. I'm Tristan Farrell. I'm a freshman at the University of Kentucky now. I graduated from the high school last year. I was in community activism with Mr. Smith, and I had a class with Mr. Fannin my junior year at the high school. But our senior year in community activism, we held the Spark Cafe pop-up coffee shop right down the road at the New Day building, and it was myself and Reagan Job and Rachel Crawl, Katie Beth Craig, and Keegan Elvidge, and they are the other students that are part of the Spark Community Cafe board. And we held this coffee shop, and it was a great community space. We had people of all ages in the building, and we had a really good time. And we went forward with trying to find other vacant buildings that we could put in a pop-up coffee shop once a month, because there wasn't one when we were doing this. So that kind of fell through. We couldn't find any other vacant spaces, and then Mr. Smith pointed us to Grace Café in Danville, Kentucky. It is a pay it forward, pay what you can style restaurant. It's a basic carbon copy of what we're bringing to Versailles. And he pointed us there, and we went and talked to the executive director about it and how we can balance a community space while also battling an issue that a lot of people don't talk about in the community, and is a big problem that, you know, people maybe even in here face, and we don't know. And so talking to her, we were told that we needed to go to Philadelphia to go to a national conference to learn more about these cafes. And with Woodford Forward's help, we were able to go and talk to all kinds of people who have opened these cafes across the nation and how they've impacted people's lives. And we got to meet Dorothea Bon Jovi, that's John Bon Jovi's wife. He's the founder of the JBJ Soul Kitchen, which is a pay what you can style restaurant in New Jersey. And after that, we came back and decided that this is what we want to do, and we've been working towards it for the past 11 months now. So it's been a fun time.
I think Tristan sells the work that they did a little bit short. The timeline that he just explained to you happened in about 3 months. So they went from an idea based on a community idea that was born in that coffee shop to a nonprofit of their own as still seniors in high school before they graduated. So we're talking about December 2nd to May 25th. They did more work, more inspirational work, and it was pretty amazing to see them go from that. That conference happened in January. They went to visit Grace Café on December 20th, the first day of their winter break of their senior years. So the amount of energy and passion that's been thrown into this by 5 young people has been inspiring, to say the least. So they always sell that part short. When they went to Philadelphia, they heard from people that had been working for 3 years on the same sort of project and had less work done and less progress made than they made in 3 months. And the fact that 11 months later, there's a space that has been identified and that we're working toward that. We were able to invite Mr. Fannin on to be part of this project, and they invited me to be part of it too, because it's really their board. It's kind of neat to be able to give 18-year-olds a birthday gift once they all turned 18 as voted onto their board, the board that they created officially. So that's a big part of what they're doing, and it's part of this transformation, I think, of downtown Versailles too.
Well, what you can do to help is we have brochures in the back at our table, and they say all the different types of sponsorships that we offer. But also, we need lots of people to just talk about it in the community and reach out to people and say that this is something that the community not only needs, but the community wants. We want a space like this where people of all different classes and ages can come together and receive equal treatment. Because this is different than any other type of restaurant or any other thing that helps with food insecurity, because it's serving people with dignity and not knowing who's paying more and who's paying less and who's volunteering for a meal. So just reaching out to the community, getting people involved, and donating.
And if anybody has any questions, we can answer them.
Thank you all so much for all your hard work and for being here this evening. So without further ado, that concludes tonight's event. So gym class is over. We can all meet out in the back. So cheers. Thank you.